I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, as I'm sure you know, Stan Lee passed away at the age of 95 as we record this today. And I just want to get your reaction to that. But before you say something, I thought it was fascinating. He was born in 1922, and his name was Stanley Martin Lieber. But he changed his name to Stan Lee because, quote, "I felt someday I'd be writing the great American novel, and I didn't want to use my real name on these silly little comics." That just seemed to be such
I get it.
a Stan Lee thing to say and a perfect thing to ask Bill Whittle about. Tell me about the cultural impact of Stan Lee and even the personal impact, if you wish.
Well, I've never been a comic book guy, and so I can't give you an awful lot of detail about his life, and I certainly can't tell you his direct impact on me in terms of I was reading his comics growing up and they inspired me or anything like that. But you could make a pretty compelling case that Stan Lee has put a bigger stamp on American culture in 2018 than anyone else I can think of. I mean, I really truly believe it. I know some people hear things like that and they think, he's a guy's a comic book artist. He's a comic book artist who has shaped the entire mythology of our culture for the last 50 years. Stan Lee's creations, foremost among which is Spider-Man, at least for me, he's certainly my favorite and always has been. They're not just pieces of fiction. The reason that Stan Lee has had the effect he's had, and for those of you not interested, are familiar with it, we're talking about Marvel Comics, we're talking about the Marvel Universe, the last, 15 blockbuster films, billions, hundreds of, I bet it's hundreds of billions now in revenues for all of this stuff. And there's a lot of people out there drawing comic books. There's a lot of people been out there writing characters, and 2 or 3 or 4 of them survived in terms of, the essential quality of them. The reason Spider-Man, I think, is such a great example is because unlike, certain visitors from planet Krypton who are, square cut and raised in a healthy family with, corn out the door and doing their chores in the morning, we're talking about a teenager, a guy who's in the most difficult years of his life, who's struggling with this sense of powerlessness that all teens have. And he wakes up the next day, just sheer accident, and he's got these amazing powers. And to understand how deeply rooted that is in every American kid's, every American boy anyway, forget American, in every young boy's heart, the idea that you could wake up, be yourself, and still have these astonishing powers is such an amazing draw.
I think the comparison with the gods, that's right. In comparison with the Greek and Roman gods, so-called, I think you've nailed something here because Stan Lee's characters had flaws. They had problems.
Precisely
they had
correct.
troubles. It's like Wonder Woman didn't really have much of a problem, and Aquaman, he's not really got any problems, and Superman doesn't really have any problems. They're not people like us. They are superheroes. But Spider-Man was a kid who goes to school and then, just in his spare time, he goes out and saves people's lives.
There are any number of lesser gods in the pantheon. And I want to just say this again because I know a lot of our audience is conservative, not much into a lot of the pop culture. But when I say they're the gods of our culture, they are in every way the same as the Greek pantheon of gods or the Roman pantheon of gods. They're, in the cases of the Greeks, they're imaginary figures that ordinary people look to for guidance and comfort and solace. And that's exactly what happens here in America. I've been talking about this with Star Wars, but Star Wars and Marvel and DC and all of this, it's all part of the same kind of thing. They're all fantastical, supernatural stories about supernatural creatures, and Americans today in this post-Christian age that we live in look to these characters in the same way that a shepherd, would be looking on the fields of Attica, would be looking up to the sky and asking Dionysius for some grapes to grow here. the power of that is amazing. And what Stan Lee had was he had the power to create major gods, right? Not the god of the harvest or the god of the hearth, or the god of thank you notes. He created he created characters that were so clear in terms of what they were, and if you think of them as gods, you can think about how each one of these, and Stan Lee didn't create all of these, obviously.
Sure.
But if you look at the majors, right, you got Batman, you got Spider-Man, and you've got Superman. I'm not a comic guy, but off the top of my head, those are the top three. And then right after that, you got Captain America, Hulk, and all the rest of it. And way down there, you've got Scarlett Johansson's character and the guy who shoots his arrows. But it has the same kind of relationship that Greek and Roman mythology have, in that there are some gods that are more powerful than others. And when I say more powerful, I don't mean that Superman is stronger than the Hulk or anything. When I say more powerful, I mean they have a more powerful grip on the imagination and the soul. And so you can learn a lot about yourself by which superhero you're most attracted to. Batman, of course, had a very dark side. In fact, not just a dark side, the Dark Knight. Everything he did was dirty. He was a good man who was terribly scarred and did dirty things in the name of good. And that under the radar, kind of noir, dark, brooding kind of, that appeals to a certain kind of person. And we talked about the Spider-Man appeal to teenagers, and for me it was always Superman. Not because I thought I could be Superman. That's actually not true, come to think of it. I remember very clearly thinking I could be Superman. I'm serious. I remember having a towel tucked in the back of a T-shirt and jumping off of our little fireplace ledge there and just saying up and away, and a little disappointed why it wasn't working. But in terms of being an adult, the thing that appeals to me about Superman, which obviously Stan Lee didn't create, is that he represents power restrained by moral good, and that the only thing that stops Superman from being lord of the planet is Superman's ethical code, which he learned from a farmer. So that appeals to me. But yeah, Stan Lee is a titan, and he will be remembered forever. I'll just close this up by saying one thing. I'm obviously a big Star Trek fan. If you could turn the camera on, you'd see it's the Museum of Star Trek in here. And I was working as a limousine driver, Scotty, and we got a call to take over a job from somebody else. I'd been working a lot, and it was, end of the day, and I was really tired. And somebody says, anybody want to do an LAX run? I said, no, not really. It's a pickup for another limo company. It's some kind of celebrity, some kind of guy who's in science fiction or something. And my ears perk up a little bit. What's the name? And it's like Mr. Forrest, DeForest Kelly? DeForest Kelly, that's it. Pachoom! So now there's like this dust-shaped outline of where Bill used to be, in the car running down to the airport. And I picked him up, and he was as gracious and as kind as he can be. And one of the skills of being a limo driver is knowing when people want to talk and knowing when they don't want to talk. And I said to him, in all seriousness, on that long drive north over the 405, I said to him, Mr. Kelly, I know you know that you've had a big impact on the culture, but has it ever occurred to you that you're immortal? That for as long as there is electricity, you are going to be remembered in this pantheon of gods. You and Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. You're immortal. He's Dead Jim is going to be spoken in languages that we haven't even that we can't imagine, and likely, if we don't screw things up too much, on planets that DeForest Kelly never ever got a chance to see because he's standing behind a plywood set someplace. But DeForest Kelly is immortal. He's immortal, as is Captain Kirk and all the rest of them. Not the actor, but the character. Because DeForest Kelly played a number of roles, and so did William Shatner, but the immortal characters are their faces on them. And I asked him about that, and he was just as astonished about it as I think anybody could be. He said, I just thought it was a job. It was an audition. I was a Westerns guy, and it's turned into a lifetime. And so anyway, I told him I was a writer, and when I dropped him off at his house, he said, hang on a second, ran inside, and a minute and a half later came out with a really nice color 8x10 of him in his Starfleet uniform and the red jacket uniform from the movies, and in gold he wrote, "Hang in there, Bill," DeForest Kelley, and that picture helped me hang in there for quite a number of years. So God bless you, Stan Lee, and the spin of everything that you did was always ultimately good. Spider-Man was a good character, and all of the rest of them. And you have put morality into the heads of people that had nowhere else to turn, and we will not see the like of you again.
You have talked often about this, Bill, the impact of entertainment on culture. And if you had a chance to go back and replay the last 100 years, and you could be either Stan Lee or William F. Buckley or Ernest Hemingway or Ronald Reagan, which do you think you'd pick if you wanted to maximize your impact on the culture?
There's no question about it. I'd be Stan Lee. There's no question about it. And people, again, I know that some people may think that's frivolous and flighty, but it's not. Ronald Reagan and William F. Buckley, just as two examples, are people who put conservative ideas into other people's heads. Stan Lee put the ideas of American goodness into other people's hearts. And that is a much tougher thing to do and a much, much more powerful thing to do. And when we realize on our side the power of the pop culture and how much power, political power, the left wields by being, I'm going to say the custodians of that, because no matter how far the left tries to ruin things like Captain America and Superman and all the rest, they just can't seem to do it. When Captain America says, you know the line better than I do, right, Scott? He says, you can't fight him, this man's a god. And he says, the god I know doesn't dress like that, and jumps out of the airplane, right? You can't take the Stan Lee out of the movies no matter how hard the custodians want to try and kill it, and the custodians want to kill Star Wars, and they want to kill Star Trek. They want to PC all of this stuff. But Stan Lee's work is immortal because it's about more important things than politics, about right and wrong, and he knew which side he was on, and 2 or 3 generations at least of Americans have gotten their primary moral instruction from this strange-looking man with the bad hair plugs, and he is going to be missed.
Well, 5 days a week, Bill Whittle is putting into people's heads the idea that we need to put these ideas into people's hearts. And we make that possible. We can do this only because of members at BillWhittle.com whose hearts have been moved and who stepped into action and contribute $9.95 a month so that they can make a difference in the culture as well. We appreciate those who have joined us for this journey. If you have not yet done that, you can go to BillWhittle.com and sign up and become a member at BillWhittle.com. We've got a brand new website over there, and we have 5 days a week generating multiple shows every day for your enjoyment and so that you can spread these around the world. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members of BillWhittle.com for making this possible.